Hello, everyone.
Welcome to Talon Talks, Season 2, Episode 2.
I know you're usually used to seeing Nick, our normal host. He will be joining us later on in the episode. For now, I'm your host, Kayla Lewis, and today we are going to be talking about change. And that includes, decisions throughout your life. We have this concept when we grow up of like a cookie cutter process of, you go to school, you get a job, you go to more school, you get married, you have kids, all these things, right? But it never seems to really work out that way, does it? So I have some people here today that are experts in change, and I wanted to pick their brains a little bit and just get some examples for you guys of what different paths through life can look like. So up first, we are going to talk with Dr. Weber.
Hi, everyone. So I went the traditional route in which I went straight to college and then started looking for a job after I finished my bachelor's degree. And managed to fall into working for the music business, doing public relations and marketing for a concert promoter, which led to working for a record label, which led to me having my own indie zine, I guess they were called at the time, which was in the skate shops and the record stores when that was the thing. You actually had to go buy CDs and music and stuff. And I did that for a while and thought it was the greatest thing ever. I got free t-shirts. I got to meet cool people. I got to interview bands like Incubus and Blink-182. But over time, I was working all the time. I was working nights. I was working weekends. Free t-shirts don't pay the bills. And so I just kept thinking, this grind is just brutal and the business is cutthroat and I don't know if this is me. And so I went back and got my master's at Cal State Fullerton and found out I could teach with a master's degree. And so I actually started working at MSJC. Our former department chair, but who's still at MSJC, Suzanne Yule, Dr. Yule, gave me a job teaching a public speaking class, and it was actually 3 weeks in, but the instructor had just ghosted them, and so they were really like just needing a warm body to be in that classroom. And so I started, I had no idea how to teach or how to do it all. And it was, throw her in the pool and let her swim. And I loved it. I mean, there was nothing better. And so little by little, I realized that I didn't want to be in something that was money grubbing and more capitalists, if you will. And I wanted to be in something that was more service-based and more helping people. And so, one department chair called another and said, you have a name and can you work here? And over time, this is sort of how the adjunct world works, is you end up teaching at a multitude of different institutions all over Southern California and online. And I sort of made that switch. And then MSJC snagged me to come in and do the journalism program. And so for a good 9 years, I was teaching just comm classes. And so it was sort of another switch to go into this new program, which my degree is in and which I'm familiar with because I had my own magazine, but is still different than just teaching public speaking and interpersonal communication and so on. And so definitely recommend a switch, especially if you're feeling like where you are is not where you're meant to be. Because once you do, then you can find more opportunities, better opportunities. I couldn't work with better people in the world. I'm really happy with where I'm at. And it was an evolution and a progression, but I'm glad I'm not still picking up drunk bands from the airport and making sure that they have everything that's on their rider and all of that stuff. So that's my story. Go ahead.
What would you say to people that are having that feeling of, maybe this isn't the right place for me. I really have a passion for something else, but are afraid that, maybe they might not make it, or it won't work out the way that they expect it to.
Well, what I did was I went to school and kept my job. So, it was night. It was not fast. I took one class at a time while I was working more than 60 hours a week. So, and then didn't let go completely. I was holding on over here still, and so
Yeah.
it wasn't like it was I'm gonna let go and try and catch myself on the way down. It was like, okay, let's network, and eventually then I'm not going to need this, so I can sort of let it go. But it's definitely worth the gamble if you have to take one. I think that change can be scary, but quite often the reasons why we don't make a change are usually just because it's comfortable. It's what we know. And you find out once you do, at least let go with one hand, that it's better on the other side, or better. Um,
Yeah, I love that. And actually, I keep a plaque above my desk that says, great things never come from comfort zones. So
mhm,
I love that you said, it's not about, you don't, change, you're not going to be comfortable, but sometimes that's a good thing.
mhm.
So thank you for sharing
Yeah.
that with us, Dr. Weber. Next up in our list of change experts is Mr. Victor Ortiz Jr. He has uh, gotten several degrees over the years, and I wanted to talk with him and see kind of how that transpired for him. So, Victor?
Well, thank you so much, Kayla, and thank you so much, Dr. Weber. I really enjoyed learning about your experience. So for me, just straight out, ever since I was a kid, I always knew that I wanted to go to college. Um, it was just more, for me, it was more along the lines of, as a military child, growing up everywhere and then returning to visit family in North Philadelphia, where I'm from. I saw firsthand the struggles and the fear of poverty-stricken neighborhoods in comparison to the world that I was growing up in. I wondered how people who legitimately wanted to change their circumstances were stuck in an endless loop of crime, welfare checks, um, and after all, in my mind anyway, one only needed to want something bad enough in order to achieve it. At least that's what I thought. um, but anyway, this is what led me to healthcare. I wanted to understand how the socioeconomic system worked and how disparities within a system could be changed. So at the young age of 18, I I set out to change the world, or at least a small part of it, because this is what I had, decided would be my purpose. I wanted to fix a system plagued with issues. Um, Many years later, I've learned that it's not about comfort in a situation, but that some people might feel resigned to their circumstances because their voices aren't being heard. Um, but just to rewind here a little bit, I have a bachelor's degree in business administration, and then my master's degree is in healthcare administration. Um, but throughout the trajectory of my career, I've just kind of noticed that I wasn't happy in healthcare leadership. I learned that personal bias and opinions often cloud better judgment in arriving at any real change impossible. So sitting in meetings consistently all day long, all day strong, just kind of having conversations about the same thing over and over and over again, yet we don't arrive at any real change or any resolution. It bothered me because I've always, again, I'm someone that I wanted to see a change. I wanted to see it better, you know. And just a constant, just sitting in meetings all day long and discussing wasn't my idea of fun. I also didn't like consistently being in behind a computer, just kind of running on Microsoft Excel and running numbers. I've never been a numbers person, so I really have I never really intended on being in a career that involved numbers. It just kind of worked out that way. So this is something that I had been thinking about for very many years. I would talk to my sister about it, would talk to my friends about it, about changing careers. But it's just, as Dr. Weber mentioned, it's really scary. Change is scary for people. You become comfortable with it, and it's a routine. And then once somebody throws in a little wrench and, that kind of changes your routine around a little bit, all of a sudden you're in unknown territory and you don't know what you're doing. I mean, it's happened. I mean, I'm in it now. I decided that with the pandemic, so many things were changing. It just kind of made me realize that life is really too short to not to go to work every day and pretend to smile. Especially as a leader, you have to be an example. If not, well, then you're kind of labeled as one of those bad, not so great leaders. So I quit my job earlier this year. I quit a career that I had built over the course of 7 years. I was once upon a time an operations manager, and I decided to go full-fledged into journalism. I had always enjoyed writing. I had always aspired to write a novel, fictional novel anyway. But I do love having intellectual conversations, or even having conversations with people just to kind of hear their ideas, because sometimes the way that I think may not necessarily be the way the world really is. Sometimes I think that in my mind it's the ideal world, utopia, but utopia doesn't really exist, does it? But anyway, I turned to journalism because in order to change something, for me anyway, or at least I hope, in order to change something on a large scale, one has to reach a larger audience to help people understand those why questions. Because I feel that a lot of people, they either ask the question or don't know how to ask the question. And as journalists, I think that it's our job to kind of try to make sense of it and try to help people make sense of it. And I understand that, not everybody's going to agree with the truth that you're saying, but it's the point is that you have to at least try to reach as many people so that there isn't so much division. So that's kind of how I got here.
I couldn't agree more with that. I think it's really important as journalists, we not only do we ask the questions, but we find the answers, and we give a voice to people and to their issues so that we can help them find solutions. So I think it's really admirable and really brave of you to make that jump over, and where I'm excited to see what you write about and what changes you're going to make in the world, Victor.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so next up we have Dr. Newman, and he is going to talk to us about another path to get to the traditional success.
Well, thank you. Yeah, my path is not not the same as Victor and Dr. Weber's. In high school, I was not on the college path. That was not really even something that, back, I'm older than everyone else here, but, back then college was for certain kids and I wasn't that kid. So I got a job after high school, and that was going to be my life. And I bounced around from jobs. I worked at Stater Brothers for a while. I worked at Del Taco. I worked at Round Table Pizza. And I know Dr. Weber's like, oh, Round Table, knowing that explains some things. But I wound up in sales. So in sales back then, this is back in the 80s, you could make a fair amount of money without a college education. So I spent, really almost, 15, almost 20 years in retail, and worked my way up into management. I worked at Circuit City and got into sales management, went over to Best Buy. And at one point, I was an assistant general manager, so I was an operations manager, and the general manager for the store was saying, hey, Ron, I'm going to get promoted. I'm going to move up into a district position. You're going to take over the store. You're going to you're going to run this Best Buy. You're my successor, right? So he's anointing me, and I'm looking at his job, and we were all scheduled, 10-hour days, 5 days a week. Holidays, you get 6 days a week, but the reality was you're salaried, so you're working 12 hours a day, and in the holidays you're working 6. And I'm looking at him, and he's working 12, 14-hour days, 6 days a week, and then on his day off, he's calling into the store to find out what the numbers are. So this is your life. And I realized, no, this really isn't the life that I want, right? So I had dabbled in college a couple of times. I had gone to community college, um, on and off. And talking to my wife, she found a job that I could do that wasn't retail, but was kind of retail adjacent, and that was teaching vocational education at a high school. And I was teaching small business management and retail merchandising at a high school. So that allowed me to go back to college because I had tried to work a school schedule around a retail management schedule, and it just doesn't work because you just can't get the consistent days off, and never mind time for homework or whatever. You just can't go to class. And we didn't have online classes back then. So so I taught high school, did that for 6 years while I got my bachelor's in vocational education with minors in communication and marketing. And then I got my master's in communication studies, and started teaching community college. I had originally gone back and I was going to get a degree in business, like Victor, business administration degree, and took a comm class and realized I really enjoyed that. I really liked that. So I switched my major there. But I came out of with my master's in 2006, and I had started teaching community college, and I actually quit the high school in 2008. And if any of you remember what was going on in 2008, I quit my full-time job and was just working part-time. And I had worked myself up into something like 9 or 10 classes because that could, pay the bills. And then the recession happened. And in a matter of 3 days, I went from being scheduled for, I think, 9 classes down to being scheduled for 4 classes. So, that was a shocker going into community college. So, but hung with it. Luckily, my wife also teaches community college, so we could kind of make it work. But yeah, just hung in there and got to the point where I got an interim full-time position, then I got another interim full-time position, then I got the full-time position. So it took a while. It took 10 years of being part-time on top of the 6 years of working at a high school to get to this place. For me, it was never really a jarring change all that much. I mean, it was a shock in 2008, but because I went from being a manager, where as a manager in retail, a lot of your time is training, and you're training students. So to go from being a manager training employees to being a teacher teaching people how to, and I was doing the same subject. So it was really just, I got rid of the key carrying and the cash handling and the all of that stuff, and then just did the training. So that was a nice, easy transition. And then going from teaching high school to teaching college, you're still teaching. And it's funny because we always, in retail, it's if you can sell, you can sell. It doesn't matter what the product is. And if you can teach, you can teach. It really doesn't matter what the subject is. But similar to what Dr. Weber said, where she kind of just was dumped in and said, here's your class, go teach it. That's kind of how I was with the high school. They just said, here's your class. I didn't know what a rubric was. I didn't know what a lesson plan was. I didn't know anything. So it was it was pretty stressful, but not as stressful as Black Friday at a Best Buy. I'll tell you that.
Love
And
that.
just to bounce off what you're saying, one of the things I always tell people is it always seems like everyone knows what they're doing, right? Nobody knows what they're doing. I mean, we all do to a degree, but my day to day is constantly learning new stuff. And so if that's what's holding you back, we're all faking it.
I mean,
Yeah, fake it till you make it.
Essentially.
I've been teaching for almost 20 years. What's this? I started teaching in 2002. And so almost 20 years now I've been teaching, and there's still stuff that I'm learning about. And then you bring in technology in different formats that you're always learning. But again, not to throw out a bunch of cliches, but you're growing or you're dying.
Mhm.
So you're always going to be learning. You're always going to be getting better at your craft or retire. Time to do something else. So
Agree with that. We
Yeah.
have to be evolving because things are not staying the same ever.
Yep. Yeah. The only thing that doesn't change is change.
Amen to that. True,
Yep.
true.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for sharing that with us, Dr. Newman. I love that you demonstrate that it doesn't matter when you decide you want to have that change. Like if it feels like the right thing to do, go for it, and you can be successful.
Yeah, I started my associate's degree because I'm old. I started my associate's degree in 1987 when I first went to a community college, and I got my associate's in 2003. So it took me 16 years to get a 2-year degree. So just plug away at it, keep going.
You can do it.
Yeah, determination will get you very far.
And I didn't get it until I was, mid 30s, and I didn't get my doctorate until I was mid 50s. So, and yeah, I'm done with degrees for now because I just got my doctorate. But you never know. In 10 years, I might decide that I want to do something else. This is a career. Like I said, I've been doing it for 20 years. I did retail for about 20 years. So,
No, not me. I'm good.
you're good. You're done. I don't know. I
used to-
might open a wood shop and start selling Adirondack chairs at the fairs on the weekends.
Well, in
So,
that case, then I'll buy one.
there you go. Now you got to buy two.
Okay.
They come in
Full.
pairs.
Too.
But
How
I mean,
about, go ahead.
yeah, I could certainly see myself transitioning to another career as if I wind down teaching, go into retirement, and do something completely different than what I've done before. So
How about you, Kayla?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So when I was growing up, I always pictured myself, going to college and, getting a bachelor's degree and moving on from there. I didn't have a definitive, like, this is what I want to be, like I didn't really figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up until like a year ago. And, that's still subject to change as we've been talking about. But it's funny that you mentioned what happened in 2008, because that was also a pretty pivotal point for me as well. I was just starting high school when the housing market crashed. And so my mom had always been stay at home because I'm the oldest of 5 kids. And my dad teaches middle school. And so, raising a family of 7 on a teacher's salary, especially in an economic recession, like it was really crazy. And we went from, doing pretty well to my parents had to file for bankruptcy so that we could like keep our house. So that affected my ability to go to college in a really big way, because my parents' philosophy was always that school was your job. So you didn't work while you were going to school, because then, your grades might not be as good. And, we were shooting for excellence and scholarships and that sort of thing. So when that all happened, it was a very stressful time for all, everyone and my family included. And my grades started to slip a little bit. I was playing water polo to kind of just have something to do, have an outlet for all that stress. And but long story short, I didn't end up with any sort of scholarship at the end, And so the option was like, okay, well then, what about student loans? And because of my parents' financial situation and the fact that I had no credit history, no job, anything, I didn't even qualify for student loans. So then, plan B for me was always to join the military. I have a pretty strong family history of military service. I have grandparents and aunts and uncles that were in, various branches during all the different wars, and we go back to the Civil War on one side of the family, and World War I, World War II, Vietnam, even up to present day with Iraq and Afghanistan. So that was always a path that I considered, but it wasn't ever really like my goal, but life happened. And so in the interest of, getting out on my own and spreading my wings, I decided to join the Navy. And originally I went in and signed up to be part of their air crew rescue, which is the people that go out in helicopters and jump out of the helicopter in the middle of the ocean to save somebody from like a shipwreck or something like that. Because, water polo is a strong swimmer, it just kind of made sense in my head. And then I went to take the ASVAB and scored really well. And then my recruiter was like, oh, well, I know you already signed this contract, but have you considered working in our nuclear power program? And I was like, no, what's that? And basically the aircraft carriers and submarines in our Navy all run on nuclear power plants. And so, I had always been interested in like math and science, engineering, physics, all that fun stuff. So it's like, all right, I could do that. And so I changed, that was my first, or I guess maybe second change. And I went and joined the nuclear power program. And 2 years of schooling later in the Navy, they picked me to stay and teach at the third school. It's an actual, it's a submarine that's been modified basically to operate next to the pier so that we can work with a real reactor plant to teach our operators before they go out like on a real boat or submarine or carrier. So I stayed there and I taught other people, how to operate a reactor plant, reactor theory, maintenance, and casualties, all that stuff, like basically everything you need to know so that the Navy would never be responsible for the next, Chernobyl, Fukushima, Three Island, all that good stuff. And I absolutely fell in love with it. I was like, I could do this for the rest of my life. I love teaching, and especially that, like, it basically like college age, because, obviously you have to be 18 to join the service. So it was just really, really cool for me to see and get to meet all these people from around the country and even some around the world. Like, we had military children like yourself, Victor, that, grew up or were born overseas and then, had been kind of all over the place. So that was where I was at. I was like, I love this. I'm going to keep doing this. And then obviously, teaching time came to an end. They sent me to a carrier up in Norfolk, Virginia in the shipyard. And I was then switching to the other side of, going out and operating one of these, big, insane machines. And had a lot of struggles in my personal life, and I ended up having some pretty major mental health issues. And so that was where the next change started for me. It was basically, my brain could not keep up with the rigor and the stress and just the crazy schedules and all the inconsistencies that come with being in the service. And so I was actually medically retired. And my goal when I joined was to do 20, maybe even 30 years. I really fell in love with it. And so it was pretty devastating to be told that I wasn't allowed to do that anymore, and the kicker was I couldn't go into that field as a civilian either because of my diagnoses. So I wasn't allowed to take these almost 7 years of training and education and apply it to, the same field on the outside. And so I really just felt like, somebody had tossed me out in the middle of the ocean and flown away and said, find your way back to shore. And like had weights tied to my ankles or something. Like, it was just like, I don't know. I didn't know what to do. And, for a little while, I really just focused on taking care of me and, getting myself back to a healthy place mentally and physically so that I could be effective in the world in general. Just basic things like, it seems silly to say now, but even just making sure that I got out of bed and ate 3 meals every day and that I took a shower every day. It really started on that small of a scale. And with the help and support of my friends and family, I, slowly started making my way back to that healthy place. And then, I decided it was time to go look for a job because, having money is nice and you can't really get by without it. My parents were gracious enough to let me move back in with them because I also in the process lost everything. I myself ended up having to file for bankruptcy and I was fresh out of a divorce and it was just it was not in a stable place really on any front. So when I was looking for jobs, I had all this experience on my resume, but it didn't apply to much of any of the positions I was looking into, even with all that training, but by the time all is said and done, when you finish that program, you essentially have the equivalent of a bachelor's in nuclear engineering. But it honestly, it felt kind of useless. Like I had wasted all this time because I really only qualified for entry level positions. My first job out of the service was working at a snack bar at a local bowling alley, and it was working with kids that were still in high school or fresh out of high school. And I was in my early to mid 20s without a college degree, without, all of these things. And so, that was where I started. And then I was like, okay, well, I think, I've got the job thing in a pretty good spot. I'm going to go back to school. And so I started at MSJC in the fall of 2019. And the original plan was to major in math so that I could pursue teaching in that field. Because kind of like what you were saying, Dr. Newman, if you can teach, you can teach. It doesn't matter what the subject is. So I was going to be a math professor. And the first year went pretty well. And then the pandemic happened in 2020. And I had somewhere in there, I had switched jobs from the bowling alley to TJ Maxx. So, now retail, but still, again, that entry level spot. But it was just, I want to do something, keep some money coming in. And when the pandemic happened, the, retail shut down. So I was furloughed. And so I was kind of scrambling. And at the time, Amazon was hiring. I think at the time they said they were hiring something like 400,000 employees nationwide. And so I went and applied to work at their warehouse in Carlsbad. And then so I was working nights processing anywhere from 15 to 25,000 packages a day. Which, yeah, do you want to talk about being tired and being sore, and then, you know, going to school on the flip side. So, long story short, that didn't work out for very long. I ended up actually getting hurt on the job, and then was out on workers' comp. And my family, we let's see, the shutdown started St. Patrick's Day, I think it was the 17th of March. And by April 19th, I had COVID, and so did everyone else in my house. And so that was a struggle. My dad ended up in the hospital, and he's okay now, but it was definitely a scary time. And, you know, our whole family was kind of at a standstill because, you know, couldn't go anywhere, couldn't do anything. We're stuck in the house. Fortunately, we have a pretty amazing support system and community, and they came together and helped us, you know, make sure that we had groceries and that, you know, we had food to eat. And so, you know, that helped us get through, you know, our own time. But then it was a transition of, okay, now the whole world is shut down, the whole world is changing around us. And I did not do well with online school. There was just something about it. I mean, I tried synchronous, I tried asynchronous. It really didn't seem to matter. Like we would do the Zoom calls and it'd be fine, but then, you know, the discussion boards and it just seemed like there was a lot of like extra assignments that you wouldn't maybe necessarily do in an in-person class. And I've come to realize now that that's because, you know, you spend a lot of time doing work when you're in class. You know, the professors make these class activities and you have discussions, and, you know, so all of those assignments were replacements for those things, but it didn't make it any easier. So that throughout all of that, my mental health kind of started spiraling down again, and actually ended up in the hospital a couple of times over the last year or so. And I realized that a lot of it was because I wasn't happy. You know, if I had chosen math because it was something that I knew and that I knew I was good at. You know, I could be successful with it if I put the effort in, but I honestly found myself pretty miserable. And I realized it's because I wasn't passionate about it. And my passion has always been people. So I spent over this last summer, I met with one of our counselors in the Veteran Resource Center, and I said, "Hey, you know, I'm considering a major change. I like writing, I like art, but I'm trying to figure out how I can make a career out of that. You know, because they say, you know, you get a degree in math and you can do all sorts of things with that." But I wasn't sure, you know, where to go. And then they said that this fall was going to be the start of the journalism program. And I immediately was, you know, it piqued my interest. I was excited. I was like, wait, really? Like I can travel, I can talk to people and tell their stories, and, you know, I can incorporate my love for photography and even like my love for poetry. You know, I'm figuring all these ways to incorporate things that I love and that I'm passionate about into a career and into something where I can use my skills, but also, you know, acquire new ones and meet new people. And so I started networking, and I was talking with some of my friends and some of my professors, and I said, hey, you know, what do you think about this? And one of my professors last year, Miss Rachel Holt, I was taking her history of dance class. And one of the projects she had us do was to compare and contrast two styles of classical dance. And I ended up writing a poem for it. And she liked it so much that she asked if it could be published in the school newspaper, in the Talon. And so I was just blown away. I was, you know, like I did something that I loved, and somebody liked it enough to put it out into the world, you know, say like, hey, this is awesome. Like, come check this out, you know? And so that was really when I realized this could be a real thing. You know, I think before that, it was more of a hope and a dream. And then, you know, in that moment, like, you know, pulling up a website and seeing my work on there, I was just like, that was it for me. You know, I was sold, you know, signed, sealed, delivered, I'm yours. Like, so now, you know, I'm working my way through the journalism program, and I'm incorporating digital media and photography and meeting all these wonderful people and helping run a podcast and a newspaper, you know, things that I never ever imagined doing. But I can honestly say that I've never been happier or felt more fulfilled than just like I have this piece that I'm doing what I was meant to do with my life.
Which
So
it makes me very happy that this came along at just the right time for you.
right, yeah, like it's crazy, like small world, you know, everything kind of comes full circle.
Very cool.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Hi,
Thank you for
Cynthia.
sharing.
Thanks for
Hi.
joining us.
Yeah, how are you, Cynthia?
I'm doing great. I just came out of a class, so that's great.
Yeah, well, we're happy
But
that you could join us.
happy I could join. Yeah, your guys' stories are really great. Thank you sharing.
Yeah, and you you mentioned to me earlier, Cynthia, that you are in the process of maybe considering a major change yourself. Could you talk to us about that a little bit?
Ugh, I don't like change. So, okay. Well, since we're going back a little bit, I'm gonna tell you my stories.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
so when I start, okay, so you guys seen the Top Gun story, right? Like
Uh-huh.
that movie. When I saw it when I was younger, I loved it. And I thought, I'm gonna go into the Air Force, you know, do something like that. And then when I got epilepsy, I didn't know you can't have epilepsy, you know, all that. So my senior year of high school, I'm like, okay, you know, I told my mom and she's like, you know, you can't do that, right? And I was like, thank you. Thank you very much. I was so crushed for not being able to go to the like military. Um, so then I had to start thinking of options. Like, what am I gonna do now? Like, I don't really have any other interest. So I started thinking of marine biologist, and then I just kind of faded away. But I do still love like wildlife. I do my best to donate. There's this website, like wildlife collections, and you can donate, track animals. Oh my God, I love it. Then so I then pursued like law enforcement, but then lost interest a little bit. So then my mom said, you're really good with kids. Why not do like child development? So that's what I stuck with. But now that I'm finishing up with child development, I'm kind of like, maybe I want to go a different direction with this. I don't know if I want to go like actually change my major, like do business, or actually go back to marine biologist, or if I actually want to branch out and like add a second what do you call it, degree, which would be like maybe social worker, like child life specialist. There's so much that I just want to do. There is so much in this world that, I mean, you gotta face. I'm still young. I'm still exploring. I'm trying to live my life. I mean, when I joined the Talon this year, I didn't know I was gonna be doing this. Like you said, I was always a shy person, so to be kind of like an outgoing person now, it's kind of like, oh my gosh, I feel like the talent does that to you.
It really does. It really does.
Yeah.
It brings you out of your shell.
Yeah, and Cynthia
Yeah.
messaged me and she's like, oh, you know, I need your advice. And you know, you would be surprised how many people come to me and say the same thing. It's like, I don't want to do this anymore. What should I do? Or how do I go
Yeah.
about it? Or and so I don't think you're alone. And I think that's the beauty of community colleges is that it doesn't cost a lot of money to kind of paddle around in the ocean for a
Mhm.
little while until you find your school of fish. You know what
Yeah,
I mean?
exactly.
Yeah. So it's I don't know, there's so much you could do, and there's no one stopping you from doing it. You just have to believe in yourself. So
We'll find a spot for you, Cynthia.
I don't
Yeah.
know
We
if I can
will.
deal with those lesson plans.
We'll find a, we'll find a
Writing
spot for
lessons
you.
plans. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I
That's,
think the overall consensus that I'm getting from, hearing all of our stories is that, it's it's really important to believe in yourself, to trust yourself, and to have courage in the face
yeah.
of fear, you know. And people hear that and, oh, well, I'm not courageous, I'm not brave, because I'm scared. But the thing is, like, just because you're afraid doesn't mean you don't have courage. It just means that there's
Mhm.
something else that means more to you, than the fact that you're afraid. So,
I feel like people, I'm sorry.
oh, go
I feel
ahead.
like people believe in more of the word can't than can. That's
Mhm.
what I hear out of people. And that's what I would usually say is I can't do that. I can't do that. But now that I'm older, I'm like, I can do that. Like, why can't I? Who's stopping me?
Exactly. Yeah, the way we talk to ourselves is so, so important. It's pivotal because,
Mhm.
I forget who said it, but there's a saying that says, whether you tell yourself you can or you can't, you're right.
It's true.
Like
A
you
Henry Ford
manifest it.
quote.
Thank you for
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So were you gonna say something, Dr. Weber?
I was going to say, since Nick isn't here, we're going to throw to him.
Yes.
So shout out to
Nick.
Nick.
Take over,
And
Nick, you
Nick.
wanna
Nick, go
share
ahead
your
and say what
story?
you were going to say.
Thank you, Kayla. So, my change started when I arrived at MSJC. I wanted to be a theater teacher when I was in high school because my theater teacher in high school made such an impact on me when I was in the program, and I wanted to do the same for others. So, I joined MSJC as a theater major, and that's what happened to me. I continued on the path to become a theater teacher, and I joined the Talon, and my mind just changed from being a theater teacher to being involved in the newspaper and being a video editor. And now I just love video editing, and that's what I want to do with the rest of my life. So I guess you can say plans do change.
All right. So
Thank you, Nick.
thank you. All right. And I think that's gonna go ahead and wrap things up for us. So thank you everyone for joining us for,
Talon Talks Season 2, Episode 2.
and I hope that we were able to give you a little bit of courage if you're considering a change. And we'll see you next week.